Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you are in luck. Hi, I'm Will Foret.
And I'm Justin Neagle, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Building Scale, where me and Will like to talk about stuff. That's effectively it, usually with a guest, but today not with a guest, because we want to talk about a couple things: risk management, some investment in technology, some different concepts that have come up that we've been asked about. And we said, hey, why don't we just put it together in a podcast, and then we can answer these questions at mass quantity. So you're stuck with us for the next half hour-ish, and I hope you really enjoy your time, because that's effectively what it's all about. It's about getting your time, or getting the worth out of the time that you're listening to us. So we really appreciate having your ears here, and buckle up, and let's get started here. So, Will, as I mentioned, risk management, investing in technology, it seems to be a thing that we've heard in the podcast come up a bunch. We've seen certainly bigger companies thinking about risk management and how that goes. But that also goes back to investment in technology. They kind of go a little bit hand in hand in different ways. And so just kind of starting it off, what's the mindset shift here that we're viewing in as we go through these episodes that we're starting to see a little bit more inkling of?
So what I can tell you is the sort of perspective on scaling companies in the space, construction, architectural engineering, they all seem to hover around the same thing or same few concepts. One of the concepts is when you look at technology, they're looking at technology as an investment. They're actually looking at most things as an investment rather than just costs. Okay. But if we talk about technology specifically for a second, there are, like, if we talk about, for example, Mancini Duffy. Okay. Mancini Duffy, they didn't even actually entirely know where their end sort of product was going to go. But they said, okay, and let's invest, let's spend a little money, right? In order to see if they could improve something. And so so even culturally speaking, they were like, it's okay to fail, but let's invest somewhere. Kind of like marketing. Marketing is it's just failure after failure until it works, right? And so the same thing around technology is, well, I know if I invest, in some place in technology, there's potentially an end game here, or a revolution that could be made. So Mancini, they had like an amazing outcome, but it took years to get to where they're at today. And at this point, they've created a SaaS model or a software model, and licensing model.
Very interesting. Bill admitted, he's like, I didn't know what they were doing. Like, I don't know. They had an idea, and I said, all right, let's go with it. And I think they even the person that was starting it was like, can I use Christian's office? Like, can I just use his office as a space to start 3D printing things and looking through VR and AR and all these different things, where it's wild because like a lot of people will be like, no, that seems like a waste of money. Where are we going with this? What is this doing? And it was very, the understanding and vision of like, no, technology is going to be super crucially important to our firm. And like, let's put our money where our mouth is. And that creates the innovation. And as you say all the time, what's innovation? It's a lot of failures. It's a
like
lot of failures.
98% failure, and then the 2%, 1% to 2% of innovation are the breakthroughs. Those are the leaps and bounds that actually take you to the next level if you're actually doing all the innovation inside the company. I think it was Sean Harris on the podcast. He said something along the lines of, investing in technology is kind of like, I think it was like investing in safety, but it's the cost of doing good business, not just the cost of doing business, cost of doing good business. I found that really interesting in how he phrased that, because there's really two mindsets around, we'll call technology and investments in technology, which is it's a cost center. I'm trying to reduce my costs as much as possible. And then you got the other one mindset, which is it's an investment. And if I don't invest in technology, it's like I'm being left behind. And we've actually seen inklings of that. What actually happens, there's a lot of people that we've talked to that have not been brought onto the podcast, but I can tell you essentially what we've observed. Companies that get behind on investments in technology, they at some point become less profitable, and it becomes even harder to invest in technology because they're less profitable. Whereas if you invest in technology as a company and have that mindset, then you're always staying ahead of the curve. Set aside some dollars, set aside some budget. You stay ahead of the curve, and it allows for feeding that engine, right? The same way it's like a marketing funnel, keep feeding that beast, right? Dollars in equals some dollars out. Same thing happens in technology, but if you get behind, it's really hard to catch up, or you have to figure out where to sacrifice in order to be able to sort of get ahead of the game again.
Yeah,
I found that super interesting.
We obviously, running an IT and cyber company, like, we understand some of these nuances, and it's very obvious to us seeing things. But why do you think that people like take technology and think it's like set it and forget it? Where it's just like, well, if I just update my server, if I just do a new workstation, or if I just do this, I'm good. Like I no longer need to invest anymore. Why do you think that mindset? It's a hurdle effectively for companies for growth, right? Because we see, like if your technology stack is running smoothly, like it's an enhancer, right? It increases production, like it totally does. There's no question about it. But like, it's not viewed that way comparatively to like marketing, to your point. Like, people understand that, like, I have to keep marketing. I can't just set marketing and forget marketing. I have to change copy. I have to change total, ad platforms. I have to change networking styles. I have to change my sales process. I have to change, like, all those things. Leaders understand, like, you have to change. You have to keep changing. You have to keep evolving. That's the only way to stay ahead in business. But when it comes to technology, which is fast changing in general, it seems to be it's like a blockade.
Disconnect. Yeah, it's a disconnect. So I don't know if I have a real answer for this. So I'm going to go from what I've observed. Mm-hmm. I think that if I look at, let's say, the construction industry, buildings last somewhere between, let's stay on the commercial side, somewhere between 20, 30 years before, let's say, you have to get the roofs done, before you have any major maintenance cycles, or the investment is kind of done and over with. We've seen buildings be longer than that, but generally investment cycle is around that. So imagine the maintenance cycles on those is not nearly as quick. So it is a little bit of set and forget it. But if you take into perspective the amount of time of, we'll call it, that investment and the return that's on that, it's a much lengthier process. And so if you sort of imagine for a second, right, making little moves, if there's a little bit of a failing in the project, or if there, or in the job, or if a maintenance cycle happens maybe a month later, generally doesn't move the needle too much one way or the other, right? When it comes to, let's say, building maintenance. And so I suspect that same concept is thought about when it comes to, computer infrastructure, things like that, and the investments there. And unfortunately, technology moves 10 times as fast there than it does when it comes to building technology, right? The advancements, there's something called Moore's Law. I'm going to get geeky a little bit. Moore's Law essentially says every 18 months, you're going to get a doubling, either doubling in speed or a reduction in size by half, right? But it's a factor of 2 approximately every 18 months. And that was consistent since I think it was like the 70s. Like that doubling has continued happening. And then in the recent, I want to say in the last 2 years, that doubling has actually accelerated because of AI and advancements in technology, which is crazy to think that it's by more than a factor of 2. So, but construction has not been like that. You can't say that you've reduced costs or reduced time by half or increased profitability, by double, or increase the speed of something by double, right? Like it doesn't work like that and on a consistent basis. So I think that's one piece. The other part is they're not taking into consideration that there are software companies that are actually kind of dictating the hardware requirements, meaning, and really the people are asking for more information, meaning you, the business owner, you, the leader, are asking for more information, more timely information. Timely information equals resources. You have to have enough resources, computing power to be able to do that, right? It's not just spreadsheets. Yes, there are businesses that run off of spreadsheets, but as soon as you get to a size, okay, spreadsheets just don't cut anymore. Then you have to have things like Procore. Then you have to have things that are Power BI platform, some sort of analytics platform, right? You have to have a way to manage the mess of documents, the mess of, and the conglomerate of collaboration that happens. So, and that speed that's required to get that information, to be able to make effective decisions, to say yes to something, to say no to something, that's data-driven rather than gut-driven. Because as good as people's guts are, data is way more effective.
No,
that means that
one thought that I just had. So we talk about people, process, technology. That's it. Those are the 3 pillars of scale. Technology, you got to have good in to get good out. We say that all the time. Like if you have crappy data or crappy processes, adding technology doesn't actually do the factor. But we very rarely make the people technology connection unless it's the other way. Hey, technology can save you on not necessarily having to throw more people at an issue. You can throw more technology at an issue, which will be a very cheaper, way to go about it. But it is people are mindset. Mindset is based on people. People that's the only mindset only comes from people, right? And this mindset shift has such a massive impact on the tech side, where you see this, oh, hey, like construction hasn't changed. Like we haven't, every 18 months doubled production. Like that's not the way it works. However, technology has. So like the mindset shifting there, and I putting that correlation together is when I look at the companies that we've interviewed that have scaled, and especially the ones that have banana scale, 10x scale in very short periods of time. It's always that they look at change and say, like, change is coming. We are going to accept change, and change is good. Like, change isn't bad. Change is good. It's different, and we're going to accept that. And not only at the leadership level, but then being able to push that down to all of the people in a corporation or in a firm or whatever you want, organization in general. So,
and even the companies that are doing growth through acquisition, even they are looking at technology differently. They're going, we need to standardize our technology. We need to standardize, because otherwise we can't effectively communicate between all our acquisitions. We can't even effectively do jobs together, right? If you acquire a company in the same city, how are you going to communicate with each other on let's say a job that you now want to start working on together? Now they're part of your company, but only in name. right? And you have to do all these other things before you can actually be able to actually work on jobs together effectively. That the factors of scale that happen through growth, well, you don't get that unless you have some sort of integration strategy with your other acquisitions. And so what we found is it's not just the financial side that has to make sense. Then even people can't make good decisions and relatively great way of handling projects and jobs unless they're able to communicate effectively on the same platforms. They're able to access the same documents, in a timely fashion, and not creating those extra clicks. Believe it or not, companies that we've seen that scale well, while they might not say it out loud, they are preventing the death by 1,000 paper cuts. Preventing technology from actually slowing them down. So the investments can be costly up front, but then they see the benefits over a long period of time. So an example of this would be, acquiring a company, I think was it Joe Fury? Yeah, Joe Fury from Michael Graves. The financial component, there has to be one that makes sense. But now if you're distributed, how do you make sure your message goes out to all the different companies that have been acquired, right? There are problems there. And here's the other thing. As change happens, as acquisitions happen, if you're on that path, if you decide that you want to acquire, you start releasing sort of the PR stuff there. Bad guys are now looking for that PR material. And then if, let's say, the company that you acquired, if the bad guys are sitting there, the bad actors are sitting in there, well, guess what? The acquiring company has more money. You are now a bigger company, bigger entity. They know you have money, and they'll spring an attack and ransom you because they know you'll pay.
Specifically the construction side of the AEC is already top 5 for the last, half decade, full decade of just attack, being attacked by cyber threats, right? So now you add in the fact that like you do acquire and you're trying to grow and you're doing all these right things and all this stuff's awesome. And then it's like, bam, this is a signal to an already very hungry criminal, effectively, to, hey, by the way, we have more money now. You're already in the system. We already have more money. So come take your bite of the apple, I guess, which is frightening, but is super true. You also mentioning the technology debt, which we've talked about, when it's like when you don't update your stuff, like when you don't actually keep technology up to date. We've seen this firsthand where it's like not only your operating system is bad, not only your software system is bad, your operating system is bad and needs to be updated, but not just like 1 year, like one update. It needs like, here's 5 updates that need to happen in a specific order that also make the user experience very different because you've not transitioned slowly through those where it's like, here's a little adjustment. It's like, no, big overhaul for your workforce, which already is hard enough as it is, changing things. But when you have to do it all at once and everything's changing, it's such a nightmare scenario.
Yeah. So employees then complain about, all these changes because what we've seen is companies think that they're saving money by not updating their software, not going through the traditional upgrades. So here's Revit, an older version of Revit. Let's stay on that version because we don't need to be sharing as many documents or whatever it is. And then when they have to go upgrade from 2017 to 2021 or something like that, all of a sudden that leap, there's no direct path to upgrades. And there's so many changes. It looks so different that all of a sudden everyone's having to relearn everything. And completely, some of the things that they maybe even had a process around, all of a sudden it's gone completely. Rather than if you went through the incremental changes, it would have been a few changes here, a few changes there, adjust your process rather than a complete rethink, redo of whatever that process looks like, right? So those are just some of the examples that we've kind of heard or seen where the technology debt starts building up. And ultimately, what we've seen is companies that don't keep up with their technology debt and let's say wait for a really long time, there's an event that becomes a catastrophe or a near catastrophe, and they get tested. And it actually becomes significantly more expensive at that time that they get tested than had they done it any time previous, if they had any type of planned obsolescence. Think of Southwest Airlines. They had huge technology debt, right? And then all of a sudden it prevented them from having flights out and things like that. Same thing, we've seen this from the construction, from the architectural side, all that. I think the AE side understands technology a little bit better, like because they have to have the high power machines, because they have to kind of keep up to date with Revit and and CAD drawings. But the trade partners, GCs, CMs, not all of them have taken that into consideration, because they're like, well, we've got frontline workers. Our brick people can still keep laying brick, and so we're doing work, right? Yeah. How are you invoicing for that work? How do you know? Where's that data coming from? If those systems are down, how are you going to get money? How are you going to reconcile your accounting system, stuff like that? How are you going to know your project progress? Because I bet you're project managing inside some piece of software.
Also with the data, I feel like we get a lot of questions about AI. Like people, like, it's a hot topic, right? It's inherently, we do IT and cyber. So like, we're in technology. So like, ask us about AI. It must be a big poster on our foreheads or something. But there's such a big misconception of like, oh, I'm just going to use AI and then it'll solve all my problems and I won't have to worry about anything. But they're not realizing that, like, when you haven't done anything with your technology and you haven't had any true data management like thought through and things like that, that you fall into this trap that you think that AI is going to be your Superman savior,
magical savior. Yeah.
Just I will organize all the things exactly how you would want them, and like there'll be no question because I'm AI and AI knows all, and that's not real. Like let's pop the bubble of enthusiasm about AI. And again, AI is good. We're not against it, but like it's not. There's so many companies that are just not ready for it because they have so much technology debt and have not positioned themselves to be just AI ready.
AI, 100%. AI requires structured. It still requires structure to your data. Okay, whether it's your file folder system, all the way to where you're storing it. I think that just everything that we've seen, companies that are moving towards the cloud, and I know that's kind of a very big topic on its own, but companies that move towards the cloud and away from on-premise equipment have a better time navigating this and the questions that are around AI than those that have stayed on-premise and decided, oh, it's cheaper if I do it in-house. It looks cheaper. I can tell you that we've done the case studies, we've done the math behind it. It's not cheaper because there's a fault. There's a horrible assumption that's being made, which is that it's just going to work regardless. And they don't think about environmental issues. They don't think that someone like Microsoft can botch their whole operation because of a bad update, and how quickly can they recover, let alone, and look, when we talk about environmental, I'm not, yes, fire, but what about dust, dirt, things like that? Unless you're a massive company that has an actual data center inside of your company, it doesn't make any sense to host data inside of your company, inside the four walls of your company. It just doesn't. Resources like HVAC, the cost of cooling, the cost of electricity, these are things that are not considered. You're only thinking about just that one, server or set of servers as your cost, the cost of licensing. There's so many other factors to this, to business continuity, that at this point, every minute is a cost. Okay. And the cost of downtime, all of a sudden being able to recover is a competitive advantage. I would argue that the cost of being able to recover is going to become more important than the actual prevention of problems. Imagine if your competitor is on the average of recovering from, let's say, a ransomware attack in 3 weeks. That is an average, by the way. You can look up the stats on Google and whatnot. There's all kinds of ways that they come to those numbers. The average is about 3 weeks, which is wild because there are people or companies that are on both ends of the spectrum. The ones that are on the lower end of the spectrum, and in the few instances that it has happened, look, servers fail. The few instances that it has happened, it has been our experience that having good business continuity gets them back up in 4 hours, not in 23 days.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Imagine if everyone's going to go through a business continuity event once, imagine the difference in what you can do, the overtime that has to be spent, the management of even handling your relationships, the project delays. What kind of questions are you going to ask your trade partner if they're down because they don't know what needs to go out as part of your job? Glass. What about the steel that has to go out for steel structures? How many bricks? Just all that. Did we check that off? It's great if it's on residential side. You can kind of count that by hand. Now imagine doing that on a massive scale. How much concrete, right? If one of your trade partners is delayed because they got attacked, that entire project, that entire job site gets delayed and pushed back. If you're trying to do, and if it's something that needs to be done in a few months, right? In Chicago, we've only got 2 seasons, winter and construction. And that construction season is not as long as some of the southern states. We probably
Arizona. It's just only construction season. That's it. That's the only season. It just gets really, really hot during our construction season, and then goes back to normal construction season. That point of if a trade partner was to go down is actually a good point. We talk about mindset and like who you work with, right? Because it's not just you. Like, hey, I invest in technology and I put money towards cybersecurity and I'm doing these things and I'm doing assessments quarterly and I'm doing, like, you're doing all that. It also is important who you're working with, right? Like thinking about that, right? Because it's like, hey, if I'm the GC and I'm locked down, like I'm totally locked down, no question about it, I'm doing everything I possibly can. Awesome, that's great. But if you have, somebody that is a trade partner, say if it's glass or steel, as you mentioned, or concrete or, whatever, if they're not locked down, what does that do? What potential risk does that bring to your business? Because then it would delay a project, which then has a whole shit ton of ramifications to that.
Delay costs money.
Yep.
Right? Delay costs a lot of money, especially if it's scheduled. Whether it's trucks, whether it's aggregate that needs to be removed or added, right? All these things. If the trade partners aren't, and let's not forget, at some point, if you're working with industries that, let's say that you work with the federal government, DoD, etc., there are already compliances and compliance frameworks that you are required to adhere by. And they're pushing out sort of the next stage around this, which is now you're going to be audited. And these sort of cybersecurity frameworks are a universal way to help companies be more secure in communicating with each other. It should hopefully prevent some fraud, which is very prevalent in the industry, right? And it should also help with a little bit of trust. What happens? So who's liable? So when we talk about risk, the obvious question comes around liabilities. If you paid an invoice, so trade partner sends you an invoice, and you go to pay that invoice, and it's going to pay it off, and then the trade partner emails you or calls you, let's say a month later, 2 months later, and goes, "Hey, where's my check? Where'd you send the money?" when are we going to get that? And you go, well, we already sent it. Come to find out, trade partner had someone inside of their email, and that bad actor sent out that email to, let's say, the GC, and GC already sent the check. Who's liable for that? Is the GC supposed to send out another check? Or is the trade partner liable because they allow their systems to be compromised?
It's a wild thing. We talked to Ryan Castle about this, former FBI agent, and how prevalent it is. I mean, it happens every day, hundreds, thousands of times a day, which is wild. And I literally just talked to a banker this week that also had mentioned, like, yeah, this is for construction clients that they have. It's without question their biggest issue when it comes up. Like, and obviously, the banker deals with a lot of money, so they're hearing about it all the time. It is scary how creative bad guys have become to get you to believe that they are the person that should be getting the money. So
I want to just draw a correlation. In the same way that OSHA goes in to do audits and assessments of how things are happening, yes, everyone hates those. But on the flip side, if those aren't happening, what happens? Someone gets hurt, and I mean that's the worst thing that can happen, right? But on the cybersecurity side, there are assessments as well. There's risk assessments around cybersecurity, and they cost fractionally in comparison to what it'll cost you if you don't know where your risks are at. Please, anyone that's listening, I urge you to at least do a risk assessment. At least do your first one. Look, I'm going to toot my own horn here for a second. Yes, we do risk assessments. Yes, we are available to do those. And I recommend at least doing it once just to see. And we generally recommend doing them quarterly, because your risk will change based on what's being done and becomes your roadmap for how to deal with things and where to invest your money. You want to understand the big question mark of how much to invest and spend in the same way that you have a number for insurance for physical safety. That number, right, between 0 and 1, is kind of your number for for insurance, and it's directly correlated to how safe your organization is. There's something very similar on the cyber security, cyber liability insurance side. And you can become uninsured, or if you have too many risks, you can't even get insured. And cybersecurity events, breaches, not only can they cost a lot of money, they can literally destroy an entire company and be belly up in less than 6 months. And it's not because you're not getting enough work, it's because you can't recover from that event. You can't recover from the trust. So there's the cost of the ransom, there's the cost of recovery. And while that company is down, they can't even do work. They're still paying their people, right? So money is going out the door, but no money is coming in. Or very little money is coming in because they can't actually check. They don't have access to their accounting systems or whatever it is, right? They can't check on job status. And then additionally, the trust, and then don't forget the legal side, right? Now, what happens if some of the stuff that was breached, right? That could be a breach of contract. If you're working with one of the data center companies, AWS, Microsoft, right? They're going to have stuff like this in their contracts, and you're going to be liable for that, which is hugely expensive, which would make you go belly up. So all the people that you're responsible for to make the company run, this is now becoming on the same level as having workers' comp and all the insurance that's around, and essentially the training and the things that need to be done around safety, the safety equipment, right? Just putting the equivalent of bumper guards. Now you have a digital version of that. It's happening. And it's not because bad guys are getting in. Let's dispel that myth, okay? We might hear about it because, on the news that, it's because bad guys got in. For smaller and mid-sized companies, it's not because the bad guys got in. It's because someone inside of your company allowed them to come in. Actually, how it happens. Over 90% of the time, that's actually what happens. Everything from clicking on a link in an email, clicking on a link on somewhere, going to the wrong site. That's how it happens. That risk is way higher because we're human. We're curious people. We're curious creatures. Ooh, that looks shiny.
Ooh, piece of candy.
Yeah.
That's how you get trapped in a box. I think this has been good. Will, I feel like we try not to hammer down on the stuff that we do, because we never want to be those people. Effectively, we want to just add value to the industry, and I think we've done that here. So for our listeners, if you do need help in regards to technology, if it's risk assessments, if it's calling because you want to know which computer makes most sense for an engineering company, which literally that call came in this week, always happy to help. We always want to be here as a resource. Or if you just need guidance in other pieces of the built world, we're full of resources. We mentioned cyber insurance. Like, we don't do cyber insurance, but we know people that do. So that's effectively it. So, Will, any fine parting words before we leave?
Do an internal risk assessment. Do it sooner rather than later, because you just don't know where those risks are at. Better to know and start figuring out how to work on those than not know and be surprised by it. That's all. It is the easiest way to figure out than the big question mark of what you're going to spend or not spend. Might be cheaper than you think.
True that. Well, listeners, thank you so much. Obviously, you can contact us. All of our stuff will be in the show notes, but if not, you don't know, spotmigration.com. I'm Justin. This is Will. And until next time, adios.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
Scale.